Hello and welcome to the Ottawa Herald's 2012 Kansas Primary Candidate Interviews. I'm Bobby Burch and I'm here with State Representative TerriLois Gregory. Representative Gregory is a Republican candidate seeking election in Kansas' new 59th House District, which encompasses northern Franklin County and all of Ottawa. Thank you for joining us, Ms. Gregory.
And also 5 precincts in Osage County.
And 5 precincts in Osage County. All right, well, let's get started. As one of Ottawa's newest residents, I figured we'd start with a question about your recent move from Baldwin City to Ottawa. Well, why did you opt out of running for office in your hometown, Baldwin City, as opposed to and starting to run in Ottawa?
Good question. Having served in Franklin County for 2 years, I knew the people here, knew the issues, and really have a heart for them here. I resonate very well with their thoughts, their beliefs, and we have challenges with our youth and the aging here in Franklin County, and we don't have the resources that they have in Douglas or Johnson County. And the good thing about me is my tenacity, and the bad thing about me is my tenacity. And I knew that I could be an excellent spokesperson for them. I sit on the Children and Family Issues Committee and had already been studying those issues. And I'm excited about what has already started here in Franklin County with bringing together different people of the community and how we can attack it, because Franklin County, Ottawa, we have a higher percentage of children's problems than they do even statewide. So it really needs to be looked at and addressed. And so I moved into my 10th district area, which is an overlap. It's the 10th district and 59th. So I'm still the sitting representative for the 10th, but I'm running for the 59th.
Well, some of those running against you have said that you have a record of moving to new districts before an election, such as when you ran or moved to Baldwin City before the last election, and as you did to Ottawa before this election. What would you say to some that are critical of those moves just before an election?
That they don't have their facts straight, because since 2006, lived there. I didn't even start to run until 2010.
Well, what about moving to Ottawa just before this election?
I moved into my own district.
So you lived in Baldwin City, correct?
Mm-hmm. When I ran for 2010, I'd lived there since 2006.
Okay.
So, and because, you know, if you want to criticize me for giving up a comfortable home, for giving up a pretty safe seat with no challenger, and moving into a known challenger, that's fine. I'm spending a lot more money than if I would have stayed in that district, but my heart is really with the people of Franklin and Osage County. So I did move. I didn't ask for that, but the courts kind of took it out of our hands, and I've done my best to comply with the court ruling.
Okay. Well, another redistricting related question. Kansas legislature attempted to and failed to draw political boundaries, new political boundaries, and federal legislature or federal judges have drawn those boundaries, like you just mentioned. And now that there are lawsuits pending because of those new maps, I'm just wondering, in your opinion, what was the legislature's inability to, or what was the cause of the legislature's inability to draw those maps?
My opinion is personal egos. The House actually completed our map and passed it with a large bipartisan majority on February the 9th. So we did show that it is possible to get it done. But I had heard even as early as February that they had wanted it to go to the courts. So if you intentionally want to tank the legislation, you can do it. But I'm kind of a glass half full person, and I believe that even though it's messy in the sausage making, this is going to actually come out good. We're gonna have almost a fresh start. And I'm sorry to lose a lot of the legislators that we have because of the institutional knowledge that they brought with them. Never realized how critical and how important that is, and until we were actually into the debates and the discussions. And the wealth of knowledge that they have is really invaluable. But Kansas is not afraid of hard work, and I think that we're going to come out fine.
How might you as a representative improve the redistricting process so maybe that taxpayers in the future don't have to pay the bill?
I think I would allow the electorate to choose their representatives. I think people got to see a different side of people who were in Topeka they weren't aware of. So I think the process is going to work itself out. It has worked in the past, and I think that we'll be fine next time. The courts were pretty clear. I don't think any legislative body after this is going to want to go through this again. They will work it out.
So I'd like to just discuss a little bit more about you personally and give viewers a chance to get to know you. In your Herald questionnaire, you said you're a former resident of Greensburg.
Mm-hmm.
And
I was born there.
Born there. And you used to own a small business there, or a small business in sales and distribution? But
not in Greensburg.
Not in Greensburg,
no,
okay.
No.
Could you tell us a little bit about the small business that you used to own?
Just various businesses. I have been in sales and distribution of other companies' products most of my life. I've also worked at the Chamber of Commerce. I was a data processing auditor, which is verifying the integrity of data, and did that for Farmland Industries and also for Yellow Freight several years. So it's a pretty eclectic background. I used to be involved in computer telephony and in wiring computer closets. So I managed my brother's construction company for a while. Okay. A little bit of everything in the background.
So you mentioned also on your campaign website that you volunteer for several organizations in the area. Would you like to discuss about maybe one of your favorite volunteer organizations that you work with?
Well, my favorite volunteering was when I would volunteer at the schools, and I just have no children of my own, so I enjoy the interaction with the kids, and was just a Girl Friday on hand if the teachers needed laminating or if they needed copying done or collating, and that's probably what I enjoyed the most. But I was a past charter member of Kiwanis organization and current member of a BPW club, which is Business and Professional Women's Club, and Rotary, and I was also a charter member of Kiwanis group. My father was actually in service clubs, so I always grew up knowing you should get back to your community.
Was that in Douglas County or was that in Franklin County?
Well, obviously they were in Douglas County. I'm transferring, already spoke with Rotary and BPW about transferring my memberships. Okay. The figures that you hear on, $2 billion within 4 or 5 years cut, those figures were given by the Kansas Legislative Research Department. And what they dealt with is static figures. It was just, if you cut the tax rate this much, here's how much less would come in. And they don't take into account several factors. One is, what they used in that modeling was a 4% growth rate, whereas normally economists use a 5 or 6% growth modeling, and Kansas history has been 8% up to double digit in growth, so it was a very conservative figure to use as a growth model. Another thing is that they assume that you receive a tax cut, I receive a tax cut, cameraman receives a tax cut, and they go to their backyard and dig a hole and bury it. They don't spend it. But the reality is that the tax cut itself is going to put more money in people's pockets, and they're going to go out and buy TVs and buy bread and buy cars and put that back into the economy, which will then turn over several times, sometimes up to 20 times. That's going to be creating more revenues. Another thing is that just the job creation alone, when we have a lower tax rate we are going to draw businesses here. The day that the tax cut was announced, the governor was receiving calls from Missouri and other states saying, how do we move our business there? We want to come there. So when we have more businesses, we are going to have more jobs. If only half of the jobs, half of the small businesses that are affected by this tax reform would create one job, we'd wipe out our unemployment. It's that simple. If we're not paying out unemployment and new employees are paying in revenues, then we're going to have even more money for our core services like our education, like our transportation, our elderly, disabled, a lot of different areas. And the thing of it is that it constitutionally, Kansas cannot carry forward a negative balance. So in the first year, the legislators would act to modify and adjust. And we will need to. We started the tax reform. The tax reform is a process. It's not an event. It doesn't happen in one day. It happens over a series of years.
You mentioned that it's turning around at this point, but that it's not a final thing with the budget, that you need to go back and readdress it continually. So what will be those things that you are looking to
address?
Right.
Okay. Until we get there, we don't know for sure. But for instance, we have 92 exemptions in our tax code. Do we really need every one of those tax exemptions? I'm sure some of them we do, but I'm not sure we need all of them. So how quickly will companies come here? You know, I've helped 2 companies move out of state into Kansas, and that's just a little start. When it was my first session in March, I talked to the Secretary of Commerce, and he said that normally out-of-state requests for possibly moving to Kansas were somewhere around 3-4 a month, and by March, because of the business-friendly legislation we were passing, the requests were, 27. I mean, just dramatic increase in interest in Kansas. So we are on the national radar now, and people are looking to Kansas because we're doing the things that we need to help improve our economy.
In the past, you had supported a bill that would establish a program of drug testing for recipients of state aid. Do you still support such a program?
Oh, yes.
Why is that?
Why would you want to give funds to a known drug addict? Wouldn't you want to protect the children that are in their home? Because what the bill does is, if you test positive and you have children in the home, then there would be a third party who would be responsible for those funds to make sure that those children are receiving the bread and the milk, instead of the parent having the money that they could then go buy drugs with. If somebody does have a problem with the drugs, then we need to know it. And the bill allows the state to pay for the drug education and to help them go through how to kick the habit.
Does that also make, are you suspicious of poor Kansans doing drugs?
I'm suspicious of rich Kansas doing drugs.
Should rich people be taxed, or should rich people undergo drug testing?
I think if I have to be drug tested to make money, I don't think it's outside the scope of being realistic to ask somebody who's receiving money to pass a drug test.
So anyone who gets a check in the state of Kansas should be drug tested?
I brought the amendment so that legislators would be drug tested. Because I receive state money, why shouldn't I pass the drug test? Right now, currently, the governor and the lieutenant governor are mandated to have a drug test, but not the other state officers. So mine drew in all the state officers and the legislative body.
Okay. Well, do you think such a program would add extra tax burdens on taxpayers?
I think that the trade-off is worth it, because the children are hurt when their parents have a problem with drugs. And to make sure that the money that we're giving actually goes to the welfare of the children is a good thing.
On your campaign website, you say that there is a real threat to our way of life in Kansas, and we must defend our state against those attacks. And I was just wondering, what is threatening Kansas' way of life, and whom are we being attacked by?
Well, we're directly being targeted by radical groups that want to change from our method of law to foreign law. We passed American law.
Which radical group was that?
Any of them. There's several. There's too many to list.
People say the Tea Party is a radical group.
But the Tea Party is not asking us to change from American law. I mean, I'm talking about
to change from American law.
Anyone who wants to not reference the Kansas Constitution or the U.S. Constitution in a court of law.
I don't know who is that.
I would be happy to email you a very long list.
All right.
Could I memorize every one of them and tell you? No.
Okay. All right.
They're all about 6 and 7 words long and sound really wonderful.
All right. One big issue, we kind of touched on this earlier, for most candidates this year will be dealing with job creation, and just wondering what are some tangible ways that you plan to stimulate the job growth?
Well, with what we've already done. By keeping the money in the small business owners' pockets, they are going to be able to invest in themselves. And as I said earlier, if half of the 191,000 small businesses would create one job, we could wipe out our unemployment in Kansas. By having people be able to use the fruits of their own labor, they are going to invest back in themselves. You can spend your money better than the government can. And I fully believe in the individuals. So by allowing an income tax break, you're going to have more money to spend in the economy. You'll spend it locally, and it's going to help the local economy.
Right now I'm going to go into some reader questions. The first one being from former Mayor Gene Ramsey, and he's a current Ottawa City Commissioner. He was wondering, what are your thoughts on the last legislative session? Do you think it was productive enough?
As far as the long timers, they said they had never seen so many large issues facing a legislative body at once. So I think that we did pretty good. Obviously, I'm very disappointed that we didn't draw our own redistricting maps, but we'll continue forward. But I'm very pleased that we have started the tax reform. That needs to happen. Disappointed that we weren't able to address the school funding formula. The formula itself is 19 years old, and it is pretty cumbersome. Really, it needs to be looked at and addressed again.
This question is from Richard Jackson. He's the CEO of the East Central Kansas Economic Opportunity Corporation. He asks, would you support continued full funding for early Head Start and other child care programs?
Well, the funding, a lot of the administration cost savings was in consolidating what had been separate and different departments or organizations. And so Head Start as a line item was moved into another department. So was the funding eliminated on paper? Yes, but the money was still there because it was moved into another department. So actually that was not on my committee. I'd be willing to study it and give a more detailed answer, but that's the overview that I know.
This comes from Laura Miller. She's an Ottawa resident. Regarding your stance on pro-family legislation, I consider equal pay to be pro-family because women should be able to better support their families. What exactly do you consider pro-family?
Well, she brings up a good point. I've stood very strongly for bills that address problems for domestic violence. Domestic violence can go either way, male or female, but it's predominantly 95% female that are the victims. And so I work very much with those survivors. I have supported pro-life legislation, and the state, it's in the state's best interest to take a position of supporting life. I've also helped with a lot of the faith-based initiatives that are out there helping open up the doors and allow them to have more involvement in the community, because there's a lot of hurting people out there, and they can step in and offer some assistance to people when they need it the most.
What would you say to her question about, or I guess her postulation of women being able to better support their family if they were to receive equal pay? Have you done any legislation, work with any legislation regarding equal pay for women?
I have not. I have not. Not that it's not on my radar to look at, but no, I have not in the past few years worked on that.
This question is from Dean Catt, the superintendent of Ottawa School District. If the tax cuts passed in last session of the Kansas legislature do not provide projected job creations, what plan do you have to restore funding lost by those cuts?
Well, there's several things. The schools in 2011 had $1.7 billion in unencumbered funds that they were carrying forward. That's a statewide amount, so each individual district, you know, you have to look at it. Also, KDOT has over $1 billion in their cash reserves and their cash funds. And then the House was adamant that we would have a 7.5% ending balance. And in addition to those funds, we are doing a reorganization of Medicaid and how that's handled. It's called CanCare. And that is projected to have $1 billion savings. So a car has a steering wheel because you need to make corrections as you drive. And as I've said, with this tax reform, some of those are going to need to be made. Until we get there, I'm not a prophet. I can't tell you how it's going to go. Do we need to, you know, increase the tax? Do we need to eliminate some of the tax deductions? Do we need to spend down some cash reserves that we have? What do we need to do? There's a lot of different options, but the schools, as I've said, the schools have continued to have funding increase. In 2011 we increased, in 2012 we increased. So the schools will be funded.
Well, this is a question from Mr. Bob Bezick. He's an attorney here in town. Now, TerriLois Gregory has stated that she is running against Obamacare. What does the state representative job have to do with that? What involvement does the representative of the 59th district have to do with federal legislation? He has a follow-up question, but I'll let you address that first.
Standing on the 10th Amendment. It's now, since the Supreme Court has ruled, it's now incumbent on the state to be able to stand against the Obamacare from being forced on us. And so that's why I've said who your state representative is critical. By not implementing the state exchange, we are not putting ourselves in a position of having $20 or $30 million a year that we have to manage and take care of a state exchange. If the federal government mandated it, let the federal government implement it and pay for it and take care of it. Mm-hmm. But in the meantime, with the ruling of Chief Justice Roberts, we now have the option of opting out of that. And by managing our Medicaid dollars much more efficiently, much more effectively, we can provide for our Kansas citizens better than if that is forced on us, than if the Obamacare is forced on us.
So would you vote to turn down the Medicare dollars that Kansas would be allocated in Obama's healthcare plan?
With the Chief Justice Roberts' rulings, mm-hmm. they cannot threaten the Medicaid funding that we are to receive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the additional funds, would you vote to turn that down? Would you rather opt out of that as well?
I would, mm-hmm. because you know, the stimulus funds. Mm-hmm. Okay, Kansas drank the Kool-Aid on that. Well, now then we have something called maintenance of effort. That maintenance of effort is causing Kansas to try and continue to spend at the federal level with state dollars. Extremely hard on our budget for us to do that. And that's a very simplified answer to what Obamacare would do to our budget. It is a job killer. The small businesses will not hire the 50th person because a lot of extra charges and an additional cost to a small business come in if you employ over 50 people. It's estimated easily 800,000 jobs will go away with that in the nation, as well as in our state. I think that we will see it. I've already talked with constituents who have businesses who have said, I cannot afford it. If that gets implemented, we will close down our business. So then how many more jobs do we lose? How many more people are fighting, for one job opening?
Another question from Mr. Biesick. Gregory claims that Blaine Finch, your competitor for the 59th district, is pro-choice. Prove it or lose it.
I've never claimed that. I've never said that. I don't even know what his position is. I don't spend my time, on my opponent's positions. I spend time on mine, and my position is that I am pro-life, that I vote for Second Amendment gun rights, I stand for individual liberties and personal freedoms.
Mm-hmm. So, to continue his question, abortion has been decided by the Supreme Court and is not a topic of state control. Why do you think that this is a priority? How does it affect our district?
Well, a child is fully capable of feeling pain at 20 weeks gestation. So when our Constitution says that, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, life is the first thing that's mentioned. And as I said earlier, it's in the state's best interest to take the position of life, because that's our citizens and we need to protect them. A woman can still have an abortion up to that point in her first trimester, up to where the child can feel pain, which is 20 weeks. But after that, no, except for the life of the mother. An ectopic pregnancy, everybody would die if you do not take that child.
One more pressing question, just to wrap things up. It's very relevant to most of your potential constituents. Do you support the Kansas Jayhawks or the Kansas State Wildcats?
I support both of them. Depends on who's playing. I have to lean a little bit more to KU because that's where I did. But if it's WSU, I mean, I root for the Kansas team. Now, when it gets down to those two fighting each other, I probably am more familiar with KU's team. But
all right. Well, thank you, Ms. Gregory, for joining us. I appreciate it.